The wind howled through the pines like a living thing, tearing at the roof of Jackson Clay's mountain cabin. Rain hammered the metal gutters, drumming a wild rhythm against the old wood. Jackson didn't mind. Storms kept people away, and people were exactly what he'd left behind. He sipped his coffee, boots up on a crate, a heavy wool blanket wrapped around his shoulders. An old action movie flickered on the screen across the room, casting green flashes of light over the walls. The Hulk roared, smashing a car in slow motion. Jackson smirked. "Never gets old," he muttered. Then the cabin shook. Not from thunder, not from wind. The whole mountainside trembled, followed by a low, unnatural hum that vibrated through the floorboards. Jackson stood instantly, instinct from 100 firefights kicking in. He crossed the room in 2 strides, pulling back the curtain. Something burned through the sky. Fast, low, and wrong. A white-hot streak vanished behind the tree line. Seconds later, a deep boom rolled across the valley, followed by the distant thud of trees crashing to the earth. Jackson was already strapping on his boots. By the time he reached the crash site, rain had turned the dirt trail to sludge. Steam hissed up from a glowing trench in the earth. Splintered pines lay like matchsticks around a sleek, black craft, no bigger than a truck, but clearly not made by any earth hands. A hiss. A panel slid open. Jackson raised his rifle, steady, calm, waiting. Something moved. A figure tumbled out, falling to hands and knees. She was humanoid, but not quite. Skin like soft silver, hair that shimmered faintly in the rain. Eyes too large, too clear, glowing faint blue in the dark. She looked up. He didn't lower his weapon, but he didn't pull the trigger either. She blinked slowly, then collapsed face first in the mud. She woke on his couch, wrapped in a blanket, her silver skin pale and bruised. Jackson had cleaned her wounds and left her water and soup. She hadn't touched either. She just sat, curled up like a stray dog, watching him with wary eyes. Jackson didn't say much. He figured she couldn't understand anyway. But when night fell and the storm roared louder, he put on a movie to distract from the chaos outside. It was The Incredible Hulk. Big mistake. As soon as the Hulk appeared on screen, green, massive, furious, the alien woman froze. Her eyes widened, body stiffening. When the Hulk roared and smashed through a wall, she bolted from the couch with a terrified gasp. Hey, Jackson stood, confused. She dove under the table, covering her head, shaking like a leaf. Her voice trembled, speaking a language he didn't know, but fear was universal. She was terrified. He paused the movie. The cabin went quiet except for the storm. Carefully, he knelt beside the table, not too close. Her eyes met his. She looked like a cornered animal. Jackson pointed to the screen. It's not real. Just a movie. Hulk. He's. Pretend. She stared at him, her eyes still wide, but something in his voice calmed her a little. Slowly, she eased out from under the table, watching the paused image on the screen with distrust. Jackson exhaled. Man, they really do believe we're monsters out there, huh? She didn't answer, but for the first time, she didn't look like she was about to run. He handed her the soup. She took it, and somewhere deep in the woods, far beyond the cabin, a distant shape watched the mountain glow, waiting. Morning sunlight poured through the cabin's windows, cutting gold beams across the wooden floor. The storm was gone. In its place came a rare stillness, like the world was holding its breath. Jackson was chopping wood outside, the rhythmic thunk of his axe echoing off the trees. Inside, Kalara watched him through the window. Her bruises were healing fast, faster than any humans would. She had strength in her stillness, but something about her posture was always ready to bolt. He noticed her watching and gave a short nod. She blinked once, then quickly looked away. Later that morning, Jackson brought in a mug of hot tea and set it on the table beside her. No more Hulk today. Promise. Kalara tilted her head, repeating softly, Hulk. He smiled. Yeah, Big green guy. Always angry. Break stuff. She mimicked an explosion with her hands and a tiny boom. Her expression wasn't amused. It was serious, like she was describing a real threat. Jackson frowned. You think Hulk is real, don't you? She didn't answer, but the way she stiffened said everything. Jackson leaned back in the chair across from her. Okay, let's try this a different way. He grabbed a notebook and pen, sketching a crude stick figure of the Hulk. Giant muscles, tiny head, angry face. Then beside it, he drew himself. Smaller, rifle slung over the shoulder, mountain behind him. Kalara watched closely. He pointed to the Hulk sketch. Not real. Then to himself. Real. She hesitated, then pointed to the Hulk and said softly, Hunter. Jackson raised an eyebrow. Hunter. Like bounty hunter. Kalara nodded slowly. Zenith. That was the first word he truly understood from her. Zenith. The name rang like steel. He didn't know what it meant yet, but it sounded important. Dangerous. He pointed to himself again. Human. She nodded. Human. Then she frowned and added, You, not like stories. Jackson chuckled. Yeah, I've heard that before. He stood and crossed to the bookshelf, pulling down an old photo album. Inside were pictures of soldiers, campfires, deserts, and friends long gone. He showed her a photo of his squad, 6 men, dusty and grinning in their camo gear. Kalara touched the photo gently. Warriors. Once, Jackson said, now I just chop wood and drink coffee. She looked confused. He mind chopping wood, then pretended to sip tea with a dramatic sigh. That finally got a small smile out of her. He handed her the remote. She stared at it like it was an alien artifact. Carefully, he guided her thumb to the play button. The movie resumed. Just a peaceful scene now. No Hulk in sight. She watched, tense at first. But after a few minutes, she began to relax. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling softly between them. Then she asked, almost a whisper, You. Protect. Jackson glanced at her. You mean, protect you? She nodded once. He didn't answer right away. He just looked at the flames dancing in the hearth. Then he nodded. Yeah, he said. I'll protect you. She leaned back, her eyes closing for just a moment. For the first time since she'd arrived, Kalara let herself rest. But far out beyond the ridge, hidden behind clouds and distance, something metallic drifted into Earth's upper atmosphere. A probe. Watching. Waiting. A signal blinked silently into space. Target confirmed. Location locked. Human contact. High. Response. Incoming. The morning air was crisp, and the sky was a perfect, cloudless blue. Jackson had just finished chopping a new stack of firewood when he heard the faintest hum. It was almost imperceptible, like the world itself was vibrating in a way that it shouldn't. He froze. It wasn't the wind, and it wasn't birds. This hum was wrong. Out of place. Jackson stood motionless, every muscle in his body going still, instinctually reaching for the rifle slung over his shoulder. He scanned the horizon. Nothing but trees, rocks, and the open valley leading up to the mountains. But something was off. Something was watching. Inside, he could hear the clink of dishes from the cabin. Kalara was organizing a few things she'd found lying around, always moving as though the world around her was an alien environment. Suddenly, the hum grew louder. It shifted into a deep, guttural pulse, like the sound of an engine rumbling to life. Jackson's heart kicked into overdrive. That wasn't some random noise. It was a ship. A ship descending. With a curse, Jackson rushed back inside. He didn't need to say anything. Kalara already stood by the window, her sharp eyes catching the shift in the air. She was visibly trembling now, her skin growing a shade paler, her hands curling into fists. Kalara, Jackson said, trying to keep his voice steady. She didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed his arm with surprising force, pulling him toward the back door. He didn't argue. They slipped into the woods behind the cabin. Jackson's mind raced. He couldn't afford to underestimate this. Whoever was coming wasn't here to make friends. And judging by the way Kaylera reacted, they were the kind of people he didn't want to meet. The sound of the ship's engines grew louder, pounding in the air like thunder. The ground beneath their feet shook with each passing second. And then, through the trees, he saw it, an enormous black craft, sleek and menacing, hovering above the clearing just outside his cabin. The ship glinted in the sunlight, its smooth, polished surface reflecting the wilderness below. Jackson's pulse quickened. This was no ordinary ship. It was military grade, built for purpose, not comfort. He could tell by the precision of its landing. They were here for Kaylera. "Stay behind me," Jackson whispered, pulling her closer to him. She nodded, her eyes wide, but she didn't speak. The fear in her was palpable, and it rattled Jackson more than he cared to admit. The ship's doors slid open with a hiss of hydraulic pressure, and two figures stepped out, tall, imposing with armor that shimmered under the sun. Their faces were obscured by dark helmets, but Jackson could see their movements, sharp and deliberate. They were soldiers, and they weren't here to ask questions. One of them raised a hand, and a soft voice echoed out of the speaker. "Kaylera, come with us." She flinched, her body going rigid. Jackson stepped forward instinctively, standing between her and the soldiers. He wasn't sure what was at play here, but he wasn't letting anyone take her without a fight. "You're not taking her," Jackson said, his voice low but firm. The soldier's helmet turned toward him. "Human, you don't understand. You can't protect her." Kaylera's voice broke the silence, trembling but clear. "I won't go back. I can't. Not to them." Jackson glanced back at her, seeing the deep, raw panic in her eyes. His protective instincts flared. The stakes were higher than he'd imagined. The soldier gave a signal, and the two of them advanced. Jackson raised his rifle without hesitation, but just as he was about to pull the trigger, Kaylera cried out, "No, please, don't." The soldiers stopped in their tracks. She stepped forward, her voice suddenly steady, almost commanding. "You don't understand. I am not a prisoner. I have information, and you will not destroy this world because of it." The soldiers looked between each other, clearly thrown off by her sudden defiance. Jackson wasn't sure what was happening, but he could feel the weight of the moment. She wasn't just some refugee. She was a piece in a much larger game. The soldier's voice crackled again, but this time with a note of uncertainty. "You think you can stand against the Zenith?" Jackson didn't know who or what the Zenith were, but Kaylera's words had the power of truth behind them. She wasn't running anymore. He was going to make sure they didn't take her. The soldiers didn't move, their armored bodies standing still as statues under the glaring sun. Kaylera's words hung in the air between them, thick with defiance. "I'm not going back," she repeated, her voice steady now, though her hand trembled at her side. "The Zenith will destroy everything." Jackson kept his rifle raised, his finger just above the trigger. His mind was racing. He didn't know who the Zenith were, but if they were willing to send soldiers after Kaylera, they weren't just some space pirates. These guys were military, organized, professional, and dangerous. One of the soldiers finally spoke, his voice cold, mechanical. "You do not understand, alien. The Zenith do not allow betrayal." Betrayal. Jackson didn't like the sound of that. He glanced at Kaylera, whose face was pale, but her eyes, those glowing, alien eyes, were locked on the soldiers with a quiet intensity. She wasn't afraid. At least she wasn't showing it. "Jackson," she whispered, her voice so low he almost didn't catch it. "They are lying. They've used us, my people, for their wars. The Zenith are no friends of Earth. They—" She was cut off by the sharp crack of a gunshot. The soldier on the left had fired into the air, the shot ringing out like thunder. Kaylera flinched, but Jackson didn't move. The soldiers weren't here to kill. At least, not yet. they were here to capture. "We don't have time for this," the soldier said, his voice cold as ice. "You will come with us." Without another word, the two soldiers lunged forward in perfect synchrony. But Jackson had already anticipated this. He dropped into a crouch, swinging the rifle up with practiced speed. The first soldier reached for him, but Jackson sidestepped, slamming his rifle stock into the soldier's side, sending him stumbling back. The second soldier was quicker, blocking Jackson's retreat and throwing a hard right hook toward his face. Jackson barely ducked, feeling the wind rush past his cheek as the fist missed by inches. His training kicked in, instincts taking over as he shifted his weight and delivered a sharp jab to the soldier's ribs. The soldier grunted, but didn't go down. He pulled out a sidearm, aiming it at Jackson's chest. Time slowed. Kalara's voice rang out behind him. "No." Before Jackson could react, a pulse of blue light hit the soldier square in the chest. He stumbled backward, his weapon falling from his grip. Kalara stood behind him, her hand raised, glowing faintly with energy. The soldier's armor flickered, its shield struggling to hold against the energy, but he didn't fall. "Get away from him," Kalara shouted, her voice filled with raw power. Jackson's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't just an alien woman. She was something more, something far more dangerous. But as the soldier regained his footing, his helmet glinting in the light, Jackson knew they couldn't keep this fight up for long. The first soldier, now back on his feet, pulled a small device from his belt. A low hum filled the air, and the ground shook beneath their feet. Jackson's eyes went wide. "Damn it," he muttered. "They're calling reinforcements." Kalara's eyes widened. "We need to leave. Now." Jackson didn't need any more prompting. He grabbed Kalara's wrist and pulled her into the trees, his mind racing. He had to get them out of here before more soldiers arrived. And he had to figure out just what the hell was going on with her, who she was, why they were after her, and why the Zenith cared so much. The ground vibrated underfoot as a low rumble filled the sky. Jackson spun around, spotting a massive ship, a battleship, this time, descending from the clouds, its silhouette dark and ominous. "Too late," he said under his breath. The ship hovered above them, casting a long shadow over the trees. A hatch opened, and more soldiers began to pour out, moving with military precision. Kalara tugged at Jackson's arm, her panic rising. "We have to run." Jackson's pulse spiked. They were surrounded now, cut off from the cabin, and outnumbered. But he wasn't going down without a fight. He reached for his knife, flipping it open with a swift motion. Kalara looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "You're not alone in this, Jackson," she said quietly. "I will fight with you." Before he could respond, the ground shook once more, a deeper, more violent tremor than before. And then it happened. From the distant sky, through the trees, there was a blur of green, too fast to see clearly, but unmistakable in its power. It tore through the air like a storm, crashing down into the clearing, sending soldiers scattering in every direction. Jackson's heart skipped a beat as he saw the silhouette of a massive figure. The Hulk. The Hulk was here. The Hulk hit the ground with the force of a meteor. Trees exploded around him as the massive green figure smashed through the dense forest. The air crackled with the sound of breaking wood and splintering rocks, the ground shuddering beneath his feet. Jackson barely had time to register what was happening before the Hulk was on top of them, standing like a mountain of rage, towering over the soldiers. The soldiers who had been closing in on them froze in shock. For a moment, the forest was silent except for the deep, thunderous growl that rumbled from the Hulk's chest. His eyes, wide and furious, locked onto the nearest soldier, who was already backing away in terror. "No," the soldier gasped, raising his weapon in an unsteady hand. This can't be." With a roar, the Hulk lunged forward, swiping the weapon out of the soldier's hand with a single, effortless motion. The soldier barely had time to scream before the Hulk's massive fist slammed into his chest, sending him flying backward like a ragdoll. He landed in a heap, motionless. Jackson stumbled back, his mouth dry. He knew the Hulk was powerful. Everyone knew that. But seeing it up close in person was something else entirely. This wasn't the Hulk from the movies. This was the real deal. Savage, unstoppable. Kaylara's eyes were wide, her body tense, but she didn't move. She was watching, her mind whirling with thoughts Jackson couldn't even begin to understand. Her alien instincts seemed to be at war with the sight of the Hulk. It was clear she recognized the danger, but there was something else. Something deeper. Fear, yes, but also familiarity. The Hulk roared again, and the earth seemed to tremble under his rage. The remaining soldiers, now completely panicked, scattered in every direction. Some ran toward the trees, others tried to fire, but it was hopeless. The Hulk was a force of nature, and they were nothing compared to his power. One soldier, a woman, aimed a pulse rifle at the Hulk's chest. She pulled the trigger, unleashing a burst of crackling energy. But the Hulk didn't flinch. He grunted, slamming his fist into the ground, sending a shockwave through the earth that knocked the soldier off her feet. She landed with a painful thud, unconscious before she even hit the ground. "Kaylara," Jackson shouted, grabbing her arm and pulling her back. "Get to cover." But Kaylara didn't move. Her gaze was fixed on the Hulk, her face a mix of confusion and something else. Recognition, perhaps. She wasn't scared now. She was fascinated. Jackson's heart raced. "Kaylara, we need to go." Finally, she blinked and shook her head. "No, he is not our enemy." "What?" Jackson's voice was sharp, filled with disbelief. "That thing is tearing these guys apart." Kaylara's eyes softened as she watched the Hulk continue his rampage. "Not our enemy. He is one of the others." Her voice was almost a whisper, as if she were speaking to herself. "He fights for the humans, not the Zenith." Jackson's mind raced. "Wait, you mean the Hulk is one of the good guys?" Kaylara's lips curled into something like a smile. "Yes, but you do not understand. They wanted him to fight. They wanted him to destroy everything. But he broke free." Before Jackson could respond, a burst of gunfire erupted from a new direction. A fresh group of soldiers had arrived in armored vehicles, their weapons trained on the Hulk. They weren't going to wait for him to make the next move. The Hulk turned, his gaze shifting toward the incoming threat. He bellowed, his voice deep and guttural, like an earthquake. In an instant, he was on them. With a powerful leap, he soared through the air, crashing down into the center of the soldiers with terrifying force. The vehicles were overturned, ripped apart like toys. The soldiers didn't stand a chance. The Hulk moved like a hurricane, punching, smashing, throwing anything in his path. Metal bent and twisted, and the air smelled like burning fuel. Jackson and Kaylara ducked behind a thick tree, watching the destruction unfold before them. Kaylara's face was unreadable now, her expression calm, as if she were witnessing something inevitable. Jackson, on the other hand, was still processing everything. "They're not going to stop," he muttered, watching the soldiers attempt to regroup. "He's going to make them all pay." "No," Kaylara said, her voice quieter now. "He is only stopping them from taking me." Jackson didn't have time to question her further. The battle wasn't over. The ship in the sky was still hovering, and Jackson could feel the weight of it. More soldiers would be coming soon, and the Hulk wouldn't be able to hold them off forever. "We need to get to the cabin," Jackson said urgently, pulling Kaylara by the arm. Now. They ran. The sound of battle raged behind them as they sprinted through the woods, and somewhere, far above them, the ship hovered, waiting for its next move. The danger was far from over. The forest around them was chaos. Behind Jackson and Kaylara, the Hulk's rampage continued. The sounds of tearing metal, explosions, and the desperate cries of soldiers faded as they moved deeper into the trees. The ground shook with each angry roar, and the distant thrum of the ship overhead reminded Jackson that their time was running out. He could feel the weight of Kaylura's gaze on him as they ran. She was silent, focused, her movements swift and sure. But her eyes, those strange, glowing eyes, betrayed her inner turmoil. She wasn't just watching the destruction behind them. She was watching the future unfold. "We can't keep running like this," Jackson said, trying to catch his breath as he darted between trees. "We need to find cover, a way to fight back." Kaylura glanced over at him, her face set in determination. "You think they will stop chasing us? They won't. Not until I'm in their hands." He knew she was right. Every step they took led them further from safety, and the soldiers were relentless. The Hulk's outburst had only bought them a few minutes of breathing room. Jackson pushed himself harder, the cool mountain air biting at his skin as they veered toward a small creek. He could hear the rushing water now, its steady flow a contrast to the violence erupting behind them. He grabbed Kaylura's arm, pulling her to the bank of the creek, and they crouched low. "Think," Jackson muttered, looking around. "Think, think, think." Kaylura crouched beside him, her face sharp with focus. "They'll come for us again. They don't care about the Hulk. They care about me." Jackson nodded grimly. The Zenith. They weren't just after Kaylura. They were after something far more dangerous, something she held. He didn't know what, but whatever it was worth everything to them. "They want me to lead them to the core," Kaylura said quietly, almost as if talking to herself. "The Zenith. They seek the power of the core of my world. They believe they can use it to control the stars. The humans won't survive." Jackson's heart thudded in his chest. "The core. The one you mentioned before." Kaylura nodded slowly. "My people, my ancestors hid it, hidden from those who would exploit it." The Zenith never stopped looking. The weight of her words settled like a stone in his stomach. The Zenith wanted to control everything. They wanted to turn the power of the stars into their own weapon. They wanted to bring it here, to Earth. Jackson looked up. The sky was clear, but he could still feel the presence of the ship above, hovering like a dark shadow. "We can't let them get to you," he said firmly, his voice low but filled with purpose. "You've got to trust me, Kaylura. We can stop them." She met his gaze, and for a moment, something flickered in her eyes, something that looked like hope. She was more than just the frightened woman from the cabin. She was a survivor, a fighter, someone who had seen things Jackson couldn't even imagine. "I trust you," she whispered. It was the first time she'd said those words. Jackson's heart skipped, but there was no time for anything but the task ahead. He stood up, scanning the forest. The creek was narrow here, the banks lined with thick foliage that could hide them, but the soldiers would be coming soon. And the Hulk, as strong as he was, couldn't keep the Zenith off forever. Then, a sound, faint but unmistakable. The whir of engines. Jackson's eyes darted to the horizon. A sleek, black vehicle cut through the trees, moving fast, low to the ground. Soldiers. They'd found them. Kaylura's hand tightened on his arm. "We have to move." Without another word, they sprinted deeper into the woods. The soldiers were closing in, but Jackson knew the terrain. He knew this forest. The trick was staying ahead long enough for the Hulk to create enough chaos to give them a window to escape. As they ran, Kaylura's voice cut through the noise. "The Zenith will follow. They will never stop. But if we can find the place they cannot reach, we can stop them." Jackson didn't understand the full weight of what she was saying, but one thing was clear. She wasn't just talking about hiding. She was talking about a final stand. They reached a small clearing, the trees thickening around them, but the vehicle was close now. Jackson gritted his teeth. "We don't have much time." Kaylura's eyes flashed, her body tensing with the energy that surged within her, her hand raised, glowing faintly, and Jackson saw the power building in her, a force that was almost alien in its intensity. It was the same power she'd used to stop the soldiers earlier. But this time, there was something different, something dangerous. "Wait," Jackson warned, stepping closer. "Kalara, no." With a sudden burst, a wave of energy shot from her hand, blasting through the trees and sending the approaching vehicle flipping backward, crashing into a nearby ridge. The force of it knocked Jackson off his feet. The forest was still for a moment, the only sound the distant hum of the Zenith's ship and the rushing of the creek beside them. Jackson's heart raced in his chest, the adrenaline pumping through his veins. Kalara was still on the ground, breathing heavily, her energy spent from the blast that had taken out the soldiers. She was weakened, but her determination was unmistakable. "We need to move," Jackson said, his voice sharp with urgency. Kalara nodded slowly, pushing herself to her feet. Her eyes flickered toward the wreckage of the Zenith's vehicle, smoke rising from it, but the soldiers inside weren't finished yet. They would regroup, they would adapt. Jackson knew it wouldn't be long before more soldiers arrived, and they were ready for the fight now. "Jackson," Kalara said, her voice calm but filled with resolve. "The Corps isn't far, but the Zenith are waiting for me. They've always been waiting." He turned to face her, his eyes narrowing with understanding. "You're saying they've been tracking you this whole time?" Kalara's gaze hardened. "Not just me. They've been tracking you too." The weight of her words sank into Jackson's gut like a lead brick. He had no idea just how deep this was. It wasn't just about Kalara. The Zenith weren't only interested in her, they were interested in Earth, his world. "We have to destroy the Corps before they can use it," Kalara continued, her voice low. "If they find it, everything is lost. We can't let them get to it." Jackson swallowed, the fear of the unknown creeping into his thoughts. "Where is it?" She pointed to the mountains in the distance, their snow-capped peaks hidden under the fading light of the day. "In the heart of the mountains, but we can't reach it if they catch us first." A roar split the air, loud and thunderous, shaking the ground beneath them. The Hulk, he had been fighting the Zenith's soldiers, fury unleashed. And now his presence was undeniable. He stood at the edge of the clearing, his massive form silhouetted against the sky, green skin glowing with raw power. "Hulk!" Kalara shouted, her voice lifting with relief and something else. Gratitude, perhaps. "We need to move. They are coming." The Hulk didn't respond in words. Instead, he turned his head toward the distant sound of approaching soldiers, his face twisted into an expression of pure rage. With a powerful leap, he vanished into the trees, moving faster than anything that Large had the right to. "Stay close," Jackson said, grabbing Kalara's arm. "This is our shot." They ran, the sound of the Hulk's rampage echoing in the distance. Every step they took seemed to carry them further from safety and closer to their final confrontation. Jackson's mind raced. How would they get to the Corps without the Zenith catching up? And what if the Hulk couldn't hold them off for long? The mountains loomed ahead, a dark, jagged outline against the bruising sky. The wind picked up, swirling through the trees, but it couldn't drown out the sound of the Zenith's reinforcements. Vehicles rumbled, heavy boots crushed the underbrush. The soldiers were closing in fast. Kalara's face was set in determination, but Jackson could see the fear in her eyes. Fear for her people, for Earth, for everything she had known. But there was something else in her, something that kept her moving forward. "Kalara," Jackson said as they climbed over a rocky outcrop, "how do we stop them?" She glanced at him, the wind tugging at her hair. "We don't just stop them. We erase their power. The Corps has the ability to regenerate itself, to heal what was broken. If we destroy it, we can stop the Zenith from ever using it." Jackson's heart pounded faster. Destroying the Corps wasn't just about protecting Kalara's world. It was about stopping a threat that could tear apart the fabric of the universe. The ground rumbled beneath their feet as the Hulk's roar echoed through the valley. It was close now, closer than ever. He was buying them time, but they were running out of it. "We're almost there," Kaylura said, her eyes scanning the path ahead. "It's hidden in the caves beneath the mountain, but it won't be easy to reach. The Zenith have left their mark everywhere." Jackson wasn't sure what she meant by that, but they didn't have time to figure it out. The soldiers were closing in too fast. They reached the base of the mountain, a massive cliff face looming before them. A dark opening, nearly invisible, was carved into the stone. Without another word, they scrambled toward the entrance. Jackson felt a pang of doubt in his chest. Would they make it in time? Would they be able to reach the core before the Zenith found them? And then, from the edge of the trees, the Hulk's roar split the air again, closer this time. His fury was unmatched, and Jackson knew with certainty that it wouldn't be long before the Zenith made their move. But the Hulk wouldn't be able to fight them all alone forever. The entrance to the cave was narrow, the walls slick with moisture, but inside, the air shifted. It was different, charged with energy that hummed beneath their feet. Jackson's pulse raced. They were in the heart of the mountain now, the place Kaylura had spoken of, where the core lay hidden, but the sense of urgency in the air was palpable. The Zenith were closing in. Jackson's eyes flickered to Kaylura as she led the way, her face set with determination. Her movements were quick, sure, but there was an edge of desperation in the way she gripped the walls for support. She was weaker than before, her energy clearly drained from the blast she'd sent earlier, but still, she pressed on. "We're almost there," Kaylura said breathlessly. "It's just ahead." Jackson nodded, the weight of their task pressing down on him. If they couldn't destroy the core, the Zenith would take control of everything. Earth, Kaylura's world, the stars themselves. The thought of it made his stomach turn. Behind them, the sounds of soldiers grew louder. The Zenith were relentless. Their footsteps echoed through the tunnel, a reminder that they were not alone. "Do you think the Hulk can hold them off?" Jackson asked, his voice low, though he knew the answer. They were running out of time. Kaylura didn't answer immediately. Her expression hardened, as though weighing something deep in her mind. Then she spoke softly, almost regretfully. "The Hulk will do what he can, but it's not enough. Not for what's coming." Jackson didn't need to ask what she meant. The energy building around them was too powerful. It was more than just a fight for survival. It was the fight for the future. The walls of the cave narrowed, and ahead of them, a faint glow began to shine. Pale blue light, pulsing like a heartbeat. The core. Kaylura slowed her pace as they neared the entrance to the chamber. Her eyes shimmered with something between awe and sorrow. "This is it," she whispered. Jackson felt it too. The air around them seemed to vibrate with power, the energy from the core filling the cave. It was as though the very rock beneath them was alive, pulsating with a force that made his skin tingle. But before they could take another step, a roar shook the cave, the Hulk's furious battle cry echoing through the mountain. "They're here," Jackson said, his voice sharp with panic. "We need to hurry." Kaylura didn't hesitate. She moved toward the glowing core, her hands outstretched as if drawn by an invisible force. The energy of the cave wrapped around her, responding to her presence. Jackson's breath caught in his throat as he watched her reach out to touch the pulsing light. But before her fingers could make contact, a sound, like metal scraping against stone, rang out through the chamber. The Zenith. Soldiers burst into the chamber, their weapons raised and aimed at Kaylura. The leader, a tall, armored figure, stepped forward with a cold smile. "You think you can stop us? You've always been running, Kaylura, but it's over now." Jackson stepped forward, positioning himself between Kaylura and the soldiers, his body tense. "We're not giving up," he said, his voice hoarse. "Not now. Not ever." But the Zenith soldiers were already moving in, their weapons ready. Jackson could feel the weight of the situation, the certainty that the final battle was upon them. Kaylura's hand hovered over the core, but she seemed torn, unsure. Then, from the shadows, a massive figure lunged into the chamber. The Hulk. With a deafening roar, he slammed into the soldiers, sending them flying across the room like ragdolls. His sheer size and strength were unstoppable. The ground trembled with every step he took, his fists crashing into anything in his path. Jackson watched in awe as the Hulk tore through the soldiers, his rage a living thing. But even as the Hulk overwhelmed the zenith, it was clear that the battle was far from over. More soldiers were coming, and their weapons were deadly. Kalara stepped forward again, her eyes locked on the core. "We can't wait any longer," she said, her voice steady. "It has to be now." Jackson turned to her, his mind racing. "Kalara, wait. If you touch it, if we do this wrong." But she wasn't listening. Her hand was already reaching for the core. Then, just as her fingers brushed against the glowing surface, a sharp cry rang out. A soldier had fired. Jackson's heart froze as the shot struck Kalara's shoulder, sending her crashing to the ground. She cried out in pain, but there was no time for anything else. The Hulk roared in fury, turning toward the soldier who had fired. With a single enraged step, he crushed the soldier underfoot. "Kalara," Jackson shouted, rushing to her side. He knelt beside her, his hand on her shoulder. "No, no, no." Kalara's eyes were distant, but she managed a faint smile. It's too late now. The core, it's ready."